Okay. Okay. The House Ethics and Oversight Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please read in the letter from Speaker Tate?
January 12, 2023. Dear Mr. Clerk, I appoint the following members of the 102nd Legislature to the standing committees for the 2023-2024 legislative session. Ethics and Oversight, Aaron Burns, Chair, Kara Hope, Vice Chair, Jamie Churches, Dylan Wegela, Jason Hoskins, Kelly Breen, Tom Kuntz, Minority Vice Chair, Mike Harris, Doug Wozniak. Sincerely, Joe Tate, Speaker of the House.
Thank you. And would the clerk please take the attendance?
Chair Burns.
Here.
Representatives Hope.
Here.
Breen.
Present.
Churches.
Present.
Hoskins.
Here.
Wegla.
Here.
Kuntz.
Here.
Wozniak.
Here.
Harris.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have 9 members present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. And Majority Vice Chair Representative Hope moves to adopt Thursday at 10:30 a.m. in room 521 of the House Office Building as the normal day, time, and location for meetings of the House Ethics and Oversight Committee. Will the clerk please take the vote?
On the motion to adopt, Chair Burns.
Yes.
Representatives Hope.
Yes.
Breen.
Aye.
Churches.
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Wegla.
Yes.
Kuntz.
Yes.
Wozniak.
Yes.
Harris.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, no nays, no pass. It is adopted.
Thank you. The House Ethics and Oversight Committee will follow Chapter 4, stated in the House Standing Rules that were adopted on the House floor. I would like to give a formal and warm welcome as we start to all of our committee members, clerk, and policy staff, and thank you to everyone who has joined us for our organizational and presentation meeting today. So I'll start us off with just a quick statement, just kind of some level setting for the committee today, and then I'd like to ask all of our members just to quickly introduce themselves and to feel free to share any information that you'd like around your district, your background, and any goals that you may have as a member of this committee. So I'll start with that statement, and then I will turn it over for our introductions. We'll start with our Majority Vice Chair Representative Hope in just a moment. So we have certainly some important work that lies ahead of us as members of this committee. We know that the state of Michigan has historically received a failing grade where ethics and oversight are concerned. We do really have a tremendous opportunity to move our state government forward and to work together across the political spectrum to ensure greater accessibility and transparency for the residents of our great state of Michigan. This is a people's government, and I look forward to working with each and every one of our committee members and folks throughout the legislature to take Michigan from that failing grade all the way, ideally, to an A+ in ethics and oversight. It's certainly a lofty goal, but one that I know can be met through an open and collaborative process. Again, I genuinely am looking forward to working with all the members of our committee, and I would now like to invite our members to introduce themselves, starting with our Majority Vice Chair, Representative Hope.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Kara Hope. I represent the 74th House District, which is South Lansing and Delhi Township, or Holt as it's known. I'm in my 3rd term. I look forward to serving on this committee. As the chair stated, we are in need of some ethical guidelines, particularly maybe for ourselves, the legislature, but yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Representative Breen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kelly Breen, House District 21. I am in my 2nd term. I represent the western area, I guess, of Oakland County, the greater Novi area, which is more than 12 Oaks Mall. There is a part of Novi that exists north of 12 Oaks Mall. And fun fact, the walled lake, the actual lake, 2/3 of it rests within the city of Novi. I'm very eager to get to work. We've got a lot of things to look at. Especially the recent ice storms have revealed some definite inadequacies in our utility system, and let's get to work.
All right, thank you so much. Representative Churches.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jamie Churches. I am excited to be here. I'm a former 5th grade teacher. I represent Downriver, and I'm just excited to work across the aisle and get things done and make sure that we're accurately and ethically representing the people of Michigan.
Thank you so much. Representative Hoskins.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Jason Hoskins, representing the 18th District, which covers Southfield, Farmington, Farmington Hills, Lathrop Village, and Oak Park. before my first term here in the legislature. Before I served in elected office here in the legislature, I was a staffer here for almost 10 years. And I also served on the city council in the city of Southfield. And so during my time as a staffer here, I actually worked for Senator Jeremy Moss. And we've certainly done a lot to make sure we raise that F rating that we have here in the state of Michigan, doing a lot with expanding the Freedom of Information Act to the state legislature and the governor's office, doing things around financial disclosure around us. And so I'm definitely hoping that we can tackle a lot of those things here in our committee. And so I'm definitely looking forward to getting to work and doing all the great things I know we can do here.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Representative Wagella?
Hi, everybody. My name's Dylan Wagella. Wagella is the pronunciation. It's been a challenge up here so far, but Chair Burns, thanks for getting that right. Anyway, so I'm a former educator of 7.5 years. I've done quite a bit of activism and organizing in communities, as well as served as a union president for 2 years. My district's District 26, which is Garden City, Inkster, Southeast Westland, and Northeast Romulus. I'll be broad in terms of priorities. I want to look into anything that will make sure that we have further transparency and making sure relationships between us as the legislature and the lobby corps are as public and accessible as possible and able to be tracked by the public.
Okay. Thank you. Minority Vice Chair, Representative Kuntz.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Tom Kuntz, 100th District. I am the gateway to the north, so Clare over to Reed City down to Big Rapids. Representative said it very well. We're here for transparency. That was what the voters put in Proposition 1, and I'm excited to work on FOIA and disclosure. That's why we're here, so great goals.
Awesome. Thank you. Representative Wozniak?
Thank you. Doug Wozniak. I'm from Macomb County. I represent Shelby Township and part of Macomb Township. I'm a graduate at the University of Michigan with a degree in mathematics. I'm a graduate of MSU with a law degree. I currently run my own law business. Plus, this is my third term here in the House, and I was in the Senate, decided to come back and try and do some good. And looking at the character of this committee, I think we're going to do great this year.
Yes, I completely agree. Thank you so much, Representative. And Representative Harris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stealing a microphone. I don't
Yeah.
have one in front of me over here.
These are a little awkward, yeah.
Mike Harris, I represent the 52nd District, which is in North Oakland County. So portions of Waterford, Independence Township, Clarkston, Lake Angeles, and portions of Springfield Township. In my past life, I was a police officer, spent 26 years in law enforcement, retired as a sergeant, and I held myself to very high standards there and held our people to very high standards, and I want to do the same thing here. So I'm glad to be part of this and look forward to working with everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for the introductions. Again, really excited about the work that lays ahead of us and really looking forward to working with all of you to move our legislature and our state government forward. All right, so at this time, I would like to invite our Auditor General, Doug Ringler, and our Deputy Auditor General and Director of Audit Operations, quite the title, Laura Hurst from the Office of the Auditor General. They will be sharing an overview and a presentation to the committee on the workings of their department. Thank you to both of you for being here today and welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the committee members. Nice to see you in person. Nice to see some familiar faces as well. We'd like to cover 3 things today, but really we'd just like to be here to answer your questions. So we've got some prepared information. We've got about 10 minutes or so of prepared notes. We'd like to give you a brief overview of our office. We'd like to take you through some of the actions that we do internally leading up to and planning our audits. Laura's going to go through how we organize our audit reports. We'll talk about communications, so how we can interact with your office, this committee, in our office, and then at any time, please interrupt us with any questions you may have. We want this to be informal and informative, so please interrupt us at any time. To repeat a little bit what the chair indicated, I'm Doug Ringler. I'm the Auditor General. I've been in office since June of 2014. Was reappointed recently in June of 22 to an 8-year term. Our office is a legislative office. We're a nonpartisan legislative office. Laura Hurst is our Deputy Auditor General. She has been in our leadership role the same amount of time that I have, just about 9 years. Collectively, we have about 50 years of experience within the OAG. I'm not trying to age either one of us, but we're being transparent today, so I thought we should throw that out there. So, from an overview perspective, our office was first created in 1836, so we're celebrating our 187th anniversary. Yeah, absolutely. In 1963, we were converted in the Constitution from an elected office to an appointed office. So I was appointed by your colleagues from a previous session. There are 19 states that have an elected Auditor General. And we're being informal today, I'm glad I'm not in an elected position. I'm glad it's an appointed position. So that's kind of what it looks like across the country. But what we do is we act in a nonpartisan fashion. So what we give one chamber, what we give one party, we give to everybody. And so that's important to us, to be objective, transparent, and independent. Our main mandate within the Constitution is perform financial performance audits and investigations of all branches of state government, and that includes like commissions and authorities and boards and those type of things. I want to point out that we don't have the authority to extend that to local units of government. So, using an example, if you got in touch with us and asked us to do something, in the city of Reed City, for example, that's where I grew up. We don't have the authority to go directly to the city of Reed City and look at their operations. If it has to do with state government, that hits within our purview. Local units of government, school districts, those types of things are outside of our purview. The way they interact with the state might be something that we can look into, but we just couldn't on our own decide to go to the city of Reed City or East Lansing or some school district, et cetera. Our overall mission was we want to improve the accountability of state funds and the operations of state government. So anything that falls within that mission statement is for us. And one other key thing to note is we don't have enforcement power. So although we write recommendations and we write observations and we would like to sometimes persuade agencies that things could be done a better way, we don't have the ability to force them to do that. They, in our terminology, that would be taking on a management role, and that would impair our independence. So we can give our advice, and we hope we give good advice, but at the end of the day, that's where that stops, and we can't force them to do what we say. In developing our audit plan, we have mandated audits, which are typically the financial audits. So state law, when it created a particular entity, whether it be the MEDC, for example, there's typically in the law it'll say that they have to have audited financial statements and where to conduct those financial statements. So when we develop our audit plan, we start with the mandated audits. Then we move on to discretionary audits, and those are typically our performance audits. In a performance audit, we're looking at how to improve their operations, their effectiveness, their efficiency, how they conduct themselves is primarily what a performance audit relates to. We use a risk-based approach for that. We start within our staff. We start at the director level of our staff because they're the ones that are most familiar with the departments and things that are of risk that are going on in the department. So we ask our staff to put together a suggestions for what they think we should be auditing. That works itself up through Laura and then ultimately to me, and then we approve that plan. But we look at different things. We look at qualitative things. Typically a lot of people think of quantitative things. If we just audited dollars all the time, there's more to life than just the dollars that get spent. So we have to look at quantitative things, public safety, the environment, the length of time it's been since we've looked at a particular entity, severity of prior findings. Is this an issue that's been within the public discussion or the legislative interest? Those are things that may not necessarily be tied to dollars, but are important, and we want to make sure that those are things that we address as well. And then lastly, we respond to stakeholder requests. And when I say stakeholders, I mean you folks as well. So we get tips sometime, we get suggestions that come from the public, we get suggestions that come from legislators. We factor those into our audit plan as well. Ultimately, we develop a 6-month audit plan. We share that audit plan with the legislature, so they understand, the quadrant, so they understand what we're auditing. We share those with the agency, and so they understand what it is that we intend to look at. We don't like this connotation that we're, it's a witch hunt kind of thing, and that we're trying to surprise anybody, those type of things. That's, do we have to do that sometimes if you've got maybe a fraud investigation? Sure, but we don't like to hold ourselves out that, we're there to surprise you and, oh, here we are today, let's audit. So that's just not how we do things. So unless you have any questions for me at that point, I'm going to turn it over to Laura.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, sir, for coming today. My question is on enforcement. If the IRS couldn't enforce, I think it would be different on taxes. Tell me that process. You turn that over to the Attorney General? I mean, there must be enforcement somehow.
Well, when I say enforcement, if it's an improve an operation, for example, those are type of things we'd like to think we were persuasive enough with the department manager that this makes good sense. This is good business operation. Sometimes it may be an existing law or a mission statement that the agency has that we're convincing them to execute themselves in accordance with what they hold themselves out to do. Okay, so there's not always like a legal type enforcement action there to say that you have to do this because this law exists. Now, typically, if our recommendation is supported by that, most agencies will look at that and say, yeah, we're not in compliance with the law, so we'll voluntarily do that. Laura will talk a little bit about the corrective action plans that the agencies craft to tell within our report, and then can come and talk to you folks in this committee or other committees what they intend to do to comply with the recommendations that we have authored. Now, one more point to your question, sir, is certainly if we look at something that we feel somebody has broken the law, we're not a prosecutorial entity. We do have relationships with the Attorney General's office to then refer items to them. So, okay.
Good to see you again, Director. Question though, I've experienced or I've sat through many of your presentations, and you just mentioned what the gist of my question was going to be is whether or not you recommend corrective action. So, but that really isn't your job, is it? Or
well, a lot of times we do in our work because we feel like that's a way of being persuasive to the agency why we think you should do something in a certain fashion. The analysis that I've used before sounds a little bit corny, but not only is there a pond in your backyard, but how deep is it, and what pump would you use to get the water out of it if you had standing water in your backyard, for example? I mean, most people realize there's a problem there. How do you help fix the problem? Is we feel like there's an onus on us to go a little bit further than just to say, in that example, you got a problem in your backyard.
Yeah, most of I think all of the reports that you have generated that I've seen are disappointing, not on your part. Your reports are great, but disappointing on the performance of the different departments. And that's why I was wondering about corrective actions on that.
Yes, there's a law that requires, I'm taking some of Laura's talking points now, but there's a law that requires the departments to develop a corrective action plan. And we put their preliminary plan in the report, and then they have a period of time to then submit a more formal one that we put on our website with their audit report. So here's the report, and then here's what their follow-up corrective action plan indicates that they're going to do. And then sometimes what's happened is if we've done a follow-up audit, the committee will come back and then say to them, well, the auditors who talked to you about this before, why didn't this issue get remedied the first time through?
Yeah, I think you indicated to me a couple months ago that you will follow up in 12 months on an audit report.
I mean, give or take, that's about the timeline. Really, it depends on the significance of the issue at hand. Sometimes agencies say, well, we need a new IT system, for example, to address that. And so there may be situations where the timeline could get stretched out a little bit longer. But yeah, the 12 to 15 month is kind of the rule of thumb that we look at. And we ask our team to identify those issues when they're suggesting items for our audit plan moving forward.
Yeah, I really appreciate your reports and the way that they're presented, and it's almost like looking in somebody else's closet, though, and
Sure.
find out what's buried in there.
Yep, no, I appreciate the kind words.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great. Any additional questions? Okay, Ms. Hurst. Great. Thank
Thank you, Doug. You should all have a copy of our State Parks Concessions, Leases, and Operating Agreements audit, and I'm just going to walk through to kind of help you navigate through one of our typical reports. If you look on the inside cover, you'll see our constitutional authority. Doug talked a little bit about that. We have that in every report. And then on the first page, right next to that, we'll have a report summary. And this will contain the audit objectives, conclusions, and any findings that we had in the audit, the severity of the findings, and whether the agencies agree or disagree with the finding. If you're on the electronic version, there will be a link after each finding so you can go right to a finding if you're interested in it. And we do classify findings as material and reportable within a performance audit. And the material findings are the ones that are more significant. When we do have a material finding in the body of the finding, we will also describe why we think it's material. So if you're able to flip to page 12, there's an example there. And it will be the very last paragraph before the recommendation. And in this case, this material was finding because of the number of exceptions we found, and then there was also a public safety risk associated with the findings here. After this section, we have an objectives, findings, conclusions, and observations section, and within that section, we'll group information by audit objective. So if we flip over to page 18, we can walk through an example of one of those sections. So for each objective, we usually have a background information. We'll list the audit objective in the conclusion. And here you can see we concluded sufficient with exceptions. So if we have a sufficiency objective, we have three options. We'll either conclude they were sufficient with exceptions, or not sufficient. If this were like an effectiveness type objective, we would say they were effective, moderately effective, or not effective. And then right below that conclusion, we list key factors that we consider when we're deciding what our conclusion will be. And these are the results of the testing that we did for this objective. And we'll include testing where we had exceptions, and then we'll also include the more positive things where maybe we didn't have exceptions. So if you look at the first bullet there, you'll see that 96% of state park managers were satisfied with the process set up for new agreements. But you'll also see in the third bullet, there were several internal control weaknesses we considered and had reportable conditions on. And then findings related to that objective will follow. You can see they start like on page 19 for this objective. And when we bring our audits, the report in and our audit work, we put it through a very thorough quality assurance process within our office, because we want to validate that everything in here is factual, and we want to ensure that we complied with all of our auditing standards. So we actually have a group of auditors within our office that audit our audit work before we make it public. Following the finding, as Doug said, we have preliminary response from the agency. So if you flip to page 22, there's an example of the agency's preliminary response. And throughout the audit process, the agency will have opportunities to talk to us about the exceptions we're finding and provide additional information. And this helps ensure that we've talked to all the right people while we're there, we've obtained all the appropriate information, and that we have the facts, that we agree on the facts. The agency agrees that this report is factual. And then during that process, a lot of times the agencies will be refining their agency preliminary response, and some of them even start implementing corrective action. And for example, in this one, DNR had already started implementing corrective action while we were in the field. As Doug said, that agencies are required by law to then submit a formal corrective action plan to the Office of Internal Audit Services, and that's within the State Budget Office. And they review it, and once they've finalized the corrective action plan, they do provide it to us, so you'll see that as a link under the report if you go to our website. And occasionally here, under the agency response, you'll see an auditor comment, and that's just because auditing standards require us to address if the agency response is in conflict with, if it's in conflict or directly doesn't agree with something that we have in the report. That wasn't necessary for this report, so we didn't include that here. In addition to findings and recommendations, sometimes we have observations. So if you flip to page 26, you can see an example of an observation. And these are things that we see while we're doing our audit that we think the report readers will be very interested in, but we don't have all the attributes required by auditing standards to make it a finding. So in this example here, there was no policy, procedure, or requirement for the department to solicit ideas from their park staff. But as we were out doing our inquiries and our site visits, we thought this would be a really good process for them. And in the last paragraph, you'll see that the agency agreed and did implement that suggestion. And then a lot of our reports have supplemental information in the form of charts, graphs, interactive maps, and pictures. And this section is really informational, and it's generally considered unaudited. If you flip to page 30, you'll see in this report we had a map, and then we have several pictures of some of the non-compliance we found when we were out on site visits. And if you're looking online, this map will be interactive. So if you're interested in your particular district, you can click on it and see some additional information. We always include a description of the program we've audited, like the one we have on page 35 in this report. It's kind of just informational. And then on page 36, you'll see we talk about our audit scope and methodology. And here's where you can go to find out a little bit more about the inquiries, reviews, the sampling that we did while we were conducting the audit. So for example, under the conclusion, we said 96% of managers were satisfied with the new agreement process. So if you were thinking, well, how many managers did you actually talk to? If you look on page 37, the second bullet point, you'll see that we surveyed 89 managers at 99 state parks, recreation areas, and scenic sites. So, and finally, we include a glossary. And this is to help define acronyms and technical terms within the audit. It starts on page 40 of this report. And when you're reading the report, the first time you come upon these words, there'll be a little asterisk after them, so you'll know there's a glossary definition. And if you're online, you could just roll over it with your mouse and the definition will pop up. So that's kind of how to navigate through the reports. If there's no questions, I'll turn it back over to Doug. Good question?
I know this might be a little off the wall. I'm sorry. We're a camping family.
Okay.
I'm a little disturbed that machetes were available for sale because my kids are right now 9 and 12, and I'm assuming they're going to have better judgment than to try to buy a machete. But it says here you surveyed 89 out of 99 state parks, but you judgmentally sampled 14 out of the 99 state parks. So does that mean you just basically called them and you didn't do site visits for the rest of them?
For the rest of them, we would not have. We would have looked at like different characteristics. So we probably tried to get geographical representation, some big ones, some small ones, and sometimes that doesn't lend itself to a statistical sample. So we kind of looked at the population. I think in this report we even sat down with DNR and said, hey, which ones do you think we should go to that are good, ones you're worried about? So, they had a little bit of input in some of the ones we went to. And when we went out and saw this stuff, we reported it immediately back to DNR, and they were really good they were on this stuff. They were out there fixing the poles that were not sturdy, and they were talking to these concession managers during the audit. So, yeah.
Well, fear not, I'm going to talk to the DNR about this. I don't need my kids getting tetanus on the playground.
Right.
So,
I'd like to add a couple of comments to it. And Laura and I participate in the conversations with our staff as they're developing, like in this case, the site visits. And what we ask ourselves is there some reason to believe that that sample wouldn't be representative of across the state? And sometimes that happens with, different geographical matters, like Laura said, whatever the case might be. I think that it's important for us to be fair to the agency. So, we're not just going to go to one spot that we already know there's a problem. We might go to see how deep the problem is there, going back to my point about how deep the water is. But the other thing is to see if that's indicative of the operations of the program across the state, or is it just a problem within a certain area. So, in the report itself, we're trying to provide balance. So we talk about plus things. Laura talked about the positive factors. Of course, we have some findings that identify negative things too, but a number of items that you're seeing here are things that Laura and I have implemented since we've been on board to try to be more balanced and fair to the agency and to the reader too, so they get a better scope of what the pluses and the minuses that the agencies have done.
no, I appreciate that because I'm new to the committee and I'm looking on your website and I see the response from the DNR and I'm not knocking them. It's a big job and I love our state parks and I don't blame you for not going to like Craig Lake State Park, which is in the boondocks and you have to like drive 7 miles down a road just to get there. So, but no, this is very comprehensive and I love that how the website's laid out so we can see the responses from the departments and see what else needs to be done. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions, and they're kind of big, I guess. One is, how do you keep your office from being politicized? Would you ever decline to conduct an audit based on that assessment? And then I wasn't going to bring this up, but now I'm a little confused. You mentioned that you can't audit local units of government, but local clerks were audited during the 2021 audit of the Bureau of Elections, so I just wondered about that.
Okay. We'll start from the top. How to keep from being political. We don't get into policy issues. So if you asked us a policy-related question, should we allow 15 days versus 20 days on something? Should we allow, should the state allow the asset test for SNAP benefits to change? That's not, we can tell you the impact of that, but that's not for us to say whether the state should or shouldn't do that. So we steer clear of the policy side of things. From our office perspective, we don't allow our staff to participate in partisan activities is a way of trying to steer clear of the politics side of things. In relation to the question about the elections, we were auditing the Department of State, and we were auditing operations that the Department of State was doing. They had some post-election audits that they were conducting, and we were retracing the steps that they did to understand what these post-audit audits were about, post-election audits were about, and they did in fact visit some of the local clerks, and so we were retracing their steps. We weren't recounting votes and those type of things. We were seeing what process the Department of State followed, and if we could make suggestions for improvements on the processes that the Department of State followed. They were not audits of, technically they were not audits of the local units. They're not audits of the local clerks. So, and there was one more piece of your question. Help me out with that one.
Yeah. Why would you decline an audit?
Okay,
Do you
thank
ever
you.
decline an request?
Sometimes they're outside of our purview. And so, again, going back to the example we had before, if you asked us to go to a particular school district or a city, we couldn't do that. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves, can we get the information to help answer the question? The third thing we look at is, do we have the resources to do that? And then fourthly is, how does that request align risk-wise with the other things that we're already doing? So, we wouldn't want to put something to the side that we feel has a higher risk to do something that has a lower risk. We're, again, trying to improve operations and help accountability. So it's just kind of a judgment call, I guess you would say, on, the importance of what the request is versus what we're already doing with our resources.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All set? Okay, Representative Wagella.
Yeah, I just had a simple question. In terms of like the auditing or inspecting process, looking at like the parks, are the inspections random, scheduled, or is it just when somebody reports it? Just looking to understand how that process works.
Well, in our case, again, we're doing a periodic audit to see the way that they conduct their parks. We would hope that DNR would utilize and sometimes surprise visits and more routine audits would be, in our view, part of their internal control. So, we wouldn't be doing that on an ongoing basis. We would look at that as to be, in this example, a management's responsibility. So don't just rely on us to do your day-to-day type oversight and monitoring. That's your job to do. We'll give you a periodic assessment of how we think you did that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess the one follow-up is like, in terms of the pictures we're looking at, were those scheduled? Did people know that the audit was coming?
Well, we were auditing DNR's local or central office, and we told them the sites we were going to, and when we started the audit, they let all of the concessionaires know that they were under audit. And then we did let the DNR central department here know where we were going, but we asked them not to let the people know. So when we showed up there to look at the stuff, they didn't know they had been selected for review.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, I have one question for you before you scoot out. I'm looking in the in this booklet that you provided with the annual report, and I'm just seeing on page 3. There's kind of a brief directory overview. Would you mind sharing with the committee members just a very brief overview of what falls under the umbrellas of the staff members who are not here speaking today, just so members have a sense of how to best engage and interact with folks? And I can give you a
sorry,
copy
Chair,
if you
which-
need it. Yep,
Just the annual
right
report.
here, page 3. Yep, in the annual report.
I have too much stuff with me.
Not a problem. Take your time.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to introduce you
Yes.
to Kelly Miller, who's with us today. She's our state relations officer. So if there are any questions, concerns, interactions you want to have with us, the best thing to do is get in touch with Kelly. She'll align our resources and get back with you folks. So that's the next person on the list there. Brian Weiler is our chief investigator. We have a tip, geez, I can't say it. A tip line, a hotline for people that want to report things to us that they've seen that they aren't sure whether there's an issue there. So state employees do that. Members of the public do that. We appoint Brian and his team to do those type of investigations. And then going back to Representative Kuhn's point, if it appears that there's been laws broken, then we'll refer those to the proper agencies. Craig Murray is the person that oversees our professional practice, so he's the one that Laura indicated make sure we stay in line with our auditing standards. Chief Information Officer, we maintain our own data center, so she's the person that's in charge of all that, you know, and manages the security of the files we have and all those type of things. And then lastly, our Director of Administration is our HR person. So we're our staff, our civil service employees, but we have our own HR department as well. So
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. And Kelly, thank you for being here with us today as well. We appreciate you. Sounds like you'll be our main point of contact. So look forward to working with you. All right. Are there any other questions from members of the committee? Rep. Wozniak.
A couple of new departments that we've got, the SOAR fund and the strategic fund. Will you be auditing those?
They certainly fall within our purview. I guess the question becomes us looking at it from a risk perspective, seeing. Let me back up 1 second. Auditing is about identifying criteria. In other words, what should have somebody done versus what did they do. So in the case of those entities or any entity, that's what we would be looking for, is our understanding of what they should be doing, what the law requires them to do, and if we have an understanding of that maybe they've went off track of that, then it would certainly rise to the level of us wanting to look into those.
Thank you, Representative. All right. Any further questions from committee members at this time? All right. Hearing none. Thank you both so much. Kelly, again, thank you also for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Happy to come back at any time. Thank
Wonderful.
you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. Well, there being no further business before the committee will stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.